there's no rules in this bitch, okay? So we're gonna talk about whatever you want, whatever we want, because we're gonna spin it and let y'all know what we're gonna talk about for 15 minutes. We're gonna give you rapid fire stuff. They're the coaches, I'm the everyday guy. I'm gonna challenge them because who the fuck are they to tell me what to do? They don't know me. They do know me. They've known me for a really long time, but that's not the point. The point is we're here to give you guys a fun podcast and hopefully you learn some shit along the way.
All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Mindset You. I'm Jason Reno. This is Moises, and that's Rances because he doesn't like his last name being said out loud. Today's episode is all about parenting, which me and Mo know nothing about because we are not parents, but we have been parented.
Remember to subscribe on our YouTube channel, VitaProject.com, or find us anywhere you listen to podcasts as Mindset You.
That's right. And don't type in VitaProject.com in YouTube. Just do Vita Project because, doesn't know what he's talking about all the time. Anyway, you said on YouTube, go to VitaProject.com.
Sorry. He's right. But you can go to VitaProject.com and you can find all the links to all the podcast sources, all the YouTube channels, and all the videos.
And everything else Vita Project.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got some other stuff. We do things.
They do things. I don't know what they do exactly, but they do them.
And he works with
us.
us.
Great. And I work with them. So I'll just let you know how good it is. It's secret, top secret. So like I said, today's episode is all about parenting. Me and Moises are not parents. Rances is. He has two wonderful kids.
Well, I think that the position here is like, okay, I'm the parent, yes. But Moises, as an educator with kids, has a lot of experience from the professional side, from the science side. And then you, from your experience of being a single child, being parented, as you said, but also of your parents being very self-aware individuals, I think that gives an interesting perspective. So it's not just like this one-sided, I'm the only parent here. I think there's a lot of perspectives here to explore.
It is true. I have parents.
Oh, man.
I think that we should talk about how parents fuck their children up.
And what do you mean by that?
So I think a lot of the times, a lot of the trauma, like we were talking about in our last episode, we were talking about our identity and where that stems from. So it stems from our experiences, but it also stems from our parents and what they tell us our identities are. And Jay had expressed how his parents basically told them, or like the children in the family, what to do. It's not a choice. It's a command, right? And I think from you kind of seen a lot of things from your family where you were parented differently, and from your brothers and your sister, and now you even parent your children differently from how you experienced it. And myself, like with my parents, and how I said, like, in order to grow, you need to think of your parents as peasants. That was actually a statement that I had once said with Paolo and Rances. It was like, yeah, that's how you get better, when you bring them down the pedestal.
Okay.
Take them off the pedestal.
Fair enough.
Yeah, but for Moses' brain, calling them peasants is really like,
It's very
he was through a whole phase where he was calling everyone peasants.
Yeah.
You went through that phase?
Yeah. It's like everybody else telling it. Yeah, I was just an asshole. Complete asshole. I'm a lot kinder and more.
Well, same here. Because you knew me when I was younger. I think I'm a lot nicer now than when I was younger because I would just run my mouth. All right, so let's start with the parent. Let's start with the guy who's actually a parent first, and then we'll switch. So, what was it like bringing two humans into the world, and what was it like navigating how you were going to raise them with Paola compared to like how you were raised?
Okay, so number one is from my parents, there is a lot of things that I put into practice with my kids. So it's not like I'm saying, my parents fucked me up and I'm going to... There was a lot of elements from my parents' parenting that I apply into my parenting. Number one is And it's funny because as a kid, I never realized how difficult this must have been for my mother until like I started parenting this way, which was my mother always encouraged me to question things, to ask why. So no matter what situation I was in, to always ask why, right? And now I felt to me that was a super empowering thing growing up. And as an adult, is like, I don't take things for what they are. I question them. So with my kids, it was like, oh, this is definitely something I want. And then you have to deal with
why.
why. So why do I have to do this? And everything needs to have a logical explanation. Otherwise, and this is the hardest part, which is like where I deviate from my parents is from like specifically because I said so, right? That idea, I encourage my kids to question why. And sometimes that challenges you to understand the reasoning behind something. And sometimes it's dumb. Sometimes your reasoning behind something is like, and I think this is where parents would say, because I told you so, is because like you've come to the end of the cliff and you're like, I don't know why. Because it just has to be this way. This is the way things are, right? And so with my kids, when they go into that realm and they want to have reasons and so on and so forth, I encourage that always. When they hear the reasonings, though, this is the challenge. This is kind of is that they're trying to create their argument to counter said reason. So their intention doesn't come from curiosity for the most part. It comes from like, how do I dismantle this? Which I also encourage.
But at the same time, like, just eat fucking food and leave me the fuck.
Well, it becomes a challenge when it's like, for example, just yesterday, they had a tutoring session that was rescheduled, right? So this is out of their routine. It was a tutoring session that happens on a Tuesdays, right? And it was rescheduled for a Saturday morning.
That's rough.
So
No one wants to upset.
So, we told them the day before, we prepared them and everything. And then the morning of, we have two kids having an emotional, mental breakdown as, why? No, I'm not going. I don't want to go. You're forcing us. And in this case, we're like, these are the reasons, so on and so forth. But we don't have time to dive into it because we have to this is a thing that we pay like $120 per session for. So
it's happening.
Yeah, we don't have time to sit here and explain all the nuances of it to get you on board. In this sense, you have to trust us.
It's kind of like that. Kids, life gives you lemons, and you're going to have to make lemonade out of it. So shut the fuck up and get in the car, and you're going to fucking learn on the Saturday.
But, it's really cool with that. I have been encouraging my kids, and my wife and I created a system for our kids to start to learn from books, right?
Wait. You're telling me you're teaching your kids to learn from books?
Personal development books.
How revolutionary are you?
No, but we've incentivized them.
I think there's an organization that does that same exact thing.
School? Library?
School, yeah. So you're home.
We're incentivizing it by paying them.
Oh, it's kind of like when we were kids and like I read a bunch of books because they would get us Pizza Hut.
You would get mealy money or something.
The Pizza Hut. So yeah, I'd never read before in my life. Then when someone was like, "You'll get pizza," this.
Yeah, so we were in the same.
Yeah, I fucking read my ass off because pizza was. I loved me some fucking pizza.
Yeah, Jay did love pizza.
Yeah, so that makes sense. You would cut school.
So funny thing is, with one of the books my daughter read is a parenting. So it's all the books from my library, and they're audiobooks. So they're, in a sense, they're beyond their age, what they're supposed to be reading. But I've set a specific group of books that I believe will keep them engaged, and also the information in it is pretty their level in that sense. So my daughter just read a parenting book, which number one, it put her to understand the perspective of parents, and also to understand what would be the ideal approach. So this does two things. This made her like recognize like, oh wow, you guys are having a hard time. And then also judge us, be like, that's not how you're supposed to handle this. You're supposed to say this and then do this.
How enjoyable is that?
So again, when things are casual, it's cool. But when we're like in this situation, we're trying to get moving, and she brings up like, no, you have to explain to us because, and it's like,
Chapter 24, Section 2.
basically. And I'm like, no, you remember the chapter about when the little kid was throwing a tantrum and they needed to cross the street? This is that chapter. So that it's challenging because we want to empower our kids to think freely, to think independently, except it's a challenge when they're thinking freely and independently when we want them to do stuff.
But I feel like that's the hard work of parenting that sometimes parents don't want to do to set their child up for success as an adult. So I see a lot of parents that will tell their child what to do, how to do it, and in extreme cases, do it for them, which then to me, in the long run, when I look at the consequences of that behavior, I'm like, that kid is not going to be able to do anything and contribute anything to society, and that's what fucks us over.
Mm-hmm.
That's one way of looking at it. That's one very extreme way of looking at it.
I think that it's identifying like the mindset component of parenting that, like with what I was sharing, it's like the challenges that I face as a parent, which has everything to do with my expectations, with my emotional management, with my managing myself. That's really the biggest challenge as a parent. But I think when you practice that management within yourself, you get to lead by example. So to your point of like, if you're shielding your child too much, right? You're not allowing them to kind of experience how to manage we talked about in the last episode about like, you know, putting yourself in uncomfortable situations. You're never allowing your child to train under the challenging circumstances. And I think that's the mindset component of parenting is when you're able to manage your own emotions, you're also able to serve as an example for your child to manage their emotion. But then there has to be an area where the child gets to practice the training.
So space for the error and the learning and the care.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's also I think people forget that parents are just oversized children at the end of the day. Like, we're all kids, and they're working through their issues because they're working with what they know, how they were raised, And it brings me to a conversation I was telling you guys earlier where I had this really long emotional talk with my mom where it was like, growing up, she raised me, like my mom and my aunts raised all of the kids in my family, the older kids at least, where like, we have these expectations of you. These aren't requests, these are commands kind of thing. And it went into one of those things where it wasn't really an issue, but my mom later on was like, I didn't treat you as an individual, even though she let me be an individual. Like, she always let me express myself. She like, but you were a possession to me kind of thing. And I just need to make sure that you were okay and that you had everything you needed and blah, blah, blah. And she goes, I didn't really realize it till you were older. And we got into this huge blowout where I essentially just blew up on her. And I was like, you don't fucking listen to me. You never fucking listen. It's always your way. And that's fine, but you don't fucking listen to me. And that's why I don't express myself. That's why I hide everything from you. So I don't talk. So I don't tell you how I feel. That's why I make everything a joke. Because you don't listen to me. And I stormed out the house. And it was the first time I actually grew a set because I was like, she always talks about fucking me up, but let's see if she can fuck me up if I run away. She's in, she's still in her towels. And I think that was the beauty of it. Like, I knew that she didn't have enough time to like get dressed and like really run after me because she was still like in her bathrobe kind of thing. And she was like, and I had no idea that she was like, when that happened, you left and you drove off. She was, I cried and I cried and I cried and I cried. And she talks to my dad and he was like, you gotta realize that he's growing up to be his own person. And as much as you want him to be okay and you want him to do these things, you gotta realize that he's gonna do his own thing whether you like it or not. And you have to make it a point where, do you want him to tell you what he's doing, or do you want him to hide what he's doing? Because right now you're teaching him how to hide everything. And going into like my future relationships, I like to hide things, you know, hide how I'm feeling, hide who I'm seeing, hide all these other things that it really took a lot of work to be like, I don't have to hide everything. I don't always have to hide stuff. And it came down from parenting. And I don't blame my parents for it, because like when I talk to my mom about it, it's just one of the things that's just how she was raised. She was raised that you do what you're told. You do what you're told, and that's how I get off your ass. If you do well in school, you do this, I won't fuck with you, kind of thing. But if you fuck up, nah, I'm on your ass. So she was my prison warden in a sense in high school and stuff like that. And it was and not in a malicious sense, because it sounds worse like saying that out loud. My mom was super loving. I love her to death. That's one of my best friends in the world. But she was doing the best with what she had. So I think growing up now, I have more empathy for parents, because I'm older, and two, I'm able to have these discussions with my parents, and like, there's so much going on in their lives to then expect them to act accordingly and act perfect every step of my life, because like, I'm not easy to deal with. I'm a reflection of them, and I'm a smart ass, and I'm stubborn, and I'm all these different things. I mean, I'm lovable, and I'm great, but at the same time, I like with your kids, how you talk about why. I would ask why all the time. I wouldn't get an answer because because I fucking said so. Shut up, go to your room, kind of thing. But it made me go from like having these weird anger at my mom when I was like in my early 20s to really understanding her now, kind of thing, and really appreciating her and realizing like everything that she does is for me. And it's a wild thing, and it's one of those things that I think that's one of the things that stopped me from being a parent sometimes, because I'm like, do I have that in me? You know? And I don't, and of course I think, if Ashley became pregnant, of course I have it in me. But
even if you don't, you'll have to.
yeah,
at one point.
but you know what I mean? Like,
You
you
have
have no choice.
You have to grow.
You have no choice but to fucking, step up to the plate, kind of thing. But it's always one of those things that like, that's my it's my crutch for being like, I don't need a kid because I'm not ready to. I don't have it in me emotionally to give all myself to it. And I'm like, you fucking do, you idiot. Like, I know I do. I know I'll be a great dad. I know I'll be a great parent. I mean, I'll be a unconventional parent, but I'll be a parent. And it's I really appreciate being able to talk to my parents now. And having some sort of clarity as like where they were mentally and stuff like that, because like, you don't think about that stuff as a kid. You don't think about what your parents are going through. You don't think about the hardships that they're going through. I don't think about the fact that like, my mom lost her dad when he was 63. You know what I mean? I thought about how it affected me, but I never really thought about how it affected her. Or like how my dad's parents, my dad was 1 of 9. He never really got the love that he showed me. And I always laugh and I make the joke that like, I'll tell my dad I love him. He's like, that's cool. And it's one of those things where I'm like, at first I was like, oh, my dad's so fucking macho. Like, he doesn't know how to express himself. And it's not that. He wasn't used to somebody telling him that they loved him. And that's fucking heartbreaking when you think about it. And to think about what that did for him and how it made him be a better parent, it makes me love him even more. And especially with almost losing him when I was younger too, that made me get really attached to my parents. And it was one of those things that I never like. It's one of those things now that like, it makes it hard to think about moving away from them, because those are two of like my closest people. And knowing that I could have lost my dad when I was younger, like, that freaks me out. Like, that's one of my biggest fears, is losing one of my parents. To this day, it's fucking scary. And I love them, fucking assholes.
Bo, I have a question for you. First, from the teacher perspective of, I'd imagine that you have had a couple hundred kids go under your tutelage, right? And then meeting their parents. And you've mentioned this in the past about like kids are the mirror image of their parents. So from the essence of the question that you asked about how parents fuck their kids up, how do you perceive that or see that or experience that as a teacher?
So, just to create clarity, I don't necessarily believe that parents actually fuck their kids up in the sense that they're consciously doing it. Like to Jay's point, I believe that they have a belief on how this brand new brain navigates this very complex world. And the only information they have access to is their experience. That's really it. And I've learned that too, as like I went through similar experiences by understanding what my parents went through. As a teacher, I would say in hindsight now, in my experience, I've learned a lot more reflecting on myself as a teacher. But what I can say is that students are the mirror image of their parents. And it's evident when like I would prepare myself for teacher-parent conference and I never met the parents before, and then the parent actually walks in, and from the physical walk,
You could tell.
you can tell whose parent that is. And it's just like, damn. Like I watched, like even myself, like I'm do things in the car, the way I drive, like there are moments and flashes that I'm like, oh shit, I'm my dad. Like, I'm my father right now. The way that I do things. And now I watch you and then I see Logan do some of his mannerisms and I'm like, oh shit, that's Rances. And it's just the way of nature. Like that's how nature replicates itself. Like it's based off, like if you look at a cell, it's based off the identical kind of replication of its previous self with some mutations. And then that cell adapts to different things. And as a teacher, I learned that very quickly. When I understood that, I stopped placing blame on the child. And that made me a better teacher because I was like, it's not their fault. Which then in hindsight made me understand it's not my parents' fault because they had parents who went through their own shit, who had parents that went through their own shit.
It's a cycle.
Yeah. And the only thing that you can actually do is help someone build awareness. And that comes with like expressing like vulnerability, like the story that you told us about with your mom. Like I think that's very important. Like in that moment that you decided to be vulnerable and truly express how you felt about a situation is what allowed her to change her behavior. And I think a lot of the times, I think like I look at the way Rances parents is like he allows that opportunity to occur, which I think makes the probability for a better human being and citizen to actually to navigate this world for the future. Like that's like really the mission of being a parent. And like you said, you don't want kids. And I think I heard, or I don't know if you don't want kids. I mean, you always joke around not having kids.
Yeah.
But I don't really know if that's like an actual thing. Like if you do or do not want. But I heard somebody say that, I think it was Patrick, the guy that I say always looks like my father. He said that the good people in the world, the people with the growth mindset are the ones that should be having kids. Yeah. Those are the people that should be having kids because those are the people that are going to increase the probability of creating human beings that will navigate this earth and this planet to a more peaceful place.
Mm-hmm. I've been watching with the kids the show that's on Hulu. Parent Test.
The Parent.
Yeah. So my kids, they found it. They were like, hey, we want to watch this, right? And we've been watching it. And the whole idea behind the show is all different types of parenting styles, right? From strict to like religious to high achiever, helicopter parents, like
modern.
Yeah, all these different types of parenting. It's like a lot different types of parenting. And my son noticed they were having like two parents were having this like debate back and forth And my son was like, why does she think that like her way is the right way? And to me, that was like, that's awesome that you can recognize that. So like for me, it's like a pat on my back for my parenting style. And it is the idea of where like we're all doing whatever we're doing because we believe it's the best thing, right? So like the helicopter parents to me is like, are you crazy? You're hurting your kids, right? To those parents, that is what they believe is the best thing for their kids. So like everyone's making these decisions based off of their perspectives, based off sometimes their trauma, right? And how to protect their kids or how to help their kids to overcome that. So I don't think that there is, you know, the best approach or anything like that. I think
It's
that
all subjective.
exactly. And like for me, with our parenting style, which like I can see a little bit of like all parenting styles in the way that we parent, but it's like, it's more about the outcome. It's more about the intent. So like we have that mission statement. It's about the intent of that, where we challenge things on that are happening and we adjust to things if we feel like they're not leading to that intent. So that though, I believe requires awareness. And that's where it comes from, you know, the key concepts that we talk about at Be The Project, which is like the awareness and the vulnerability. Because for parents to have those moments like your parents had, where you said that to your mom and she reflected, as opposed to digging her heels in and saying, no, it's I'm right versus effective, right? That is the hardest thing about parenting.
It really is.
And if you're too egotistical to recognize, to me, that's how you hurt your kids. If you're unwilling to challenge yourself.
Yeah. I think I'm watching my dad, because I have a 3-year-old.
Yeah, you're watching your dad again.
Yeah, I'm watching my dad be a dad while after experiencing his form of being a father to me. And it's really interesting because the approach is very different at 65 years old.
Do you ever feel like some sort of resentment sometimes? Like when you see the way like he treats?
No, I don't.
No, that's
I
beautiful.
don't.
That's a good.
I know my sisters do.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I know my younger sister, the 19-year-old. Yeah, she's the one that experiences the resentment, and I can totally understand why. Like, just being there, right? Like my little sister didn't have that opportunity, but I kind of understand like where my dad's coming from, and I see my dad reflecting on the way that he parented, like my full sister Nina and I, and then now how he's approaching, you know, my youngest sister, and that to me was pretty interesting, to see him change his approach, because my dad, I remember I always spoke to Rances about this. My dad's really like stubborn. He's like down to the line, like it's his way or no way. But in the past couple of years, he's changed that, and I think it's because the world is changing too.
Yeah.
And in order to be an effective parent, like
it doesn't work the way it used to.
Yeah, your framing or the way that you perceive the world no longer exists. So therefore, all the skills and, well, not all the skills, but like you can argue that the skills that you have or the way that you perceive the world or navigated the world no longer works, right? And it doesn't work for me. Like, we believe in adaptability. So the way that I approach, even when I talk to teachers, when I go into the rooms and I consult teachers, I talk about what skills are you going to teach in order for them to synthesize information to be able to make their own decisions. And I think parenting is no different.
All right, so everybody, that was us talking about parenting and being parented. Remember to like, subscribe, and follow us on YouTube at Be The Project, and to also visit BeTheProject.com to watch all our podcasts and everything else that's Be The Project related. And if you're on Spotify and any other place where you listen to podcasts, follow us at Mindset U.